You're just trying to chop an onion and suddenly you're crying like something sad happened. But it's not emotions, it's chemistry. The real mystery is, how does a simple vegetable turn your eyes into a faucet? In this segment, we'll track what changes the moment your knife slices through an onion, what gets released into the air, and why your eyes react so fast. Ready to see the chain reaction up close? Onions belong to the allium family, a group of plants built with strong smelling chemistry. That family connection hints there's a built-in defense system. It starts in the ground. Onions absorb sulfur from the soil as they grow. That sulfur becomes part of the onion's internal chemical ingredients. Inside the onion, those ingredients are stored in separate compartments. As long as the cells stay intact, the chemicals can't easily interact. When you cut an onion, you physically break its cells open. That cell rupture is like popping tiny chemical containers all at once. Once the cells break, their internal contents spill out. Chemicals that were kept apart suddenly share the same space and start mixing quickly. Now, enzymes meet an amino acid sulfoxide that was previously separated. That contact triggers a fast reaction because the onion's chemistry finally connects. The reaction produces a volatile sulfur gas. Volatile means it easily becomes airborne, so it doesn't stay on the cutting board. That volatile sulfur gas wafts upward as you chop. Since your face is close to the onion, the gas drifts straight towards your eyes. So far, we've seen the setup. Onions absorb sulfur, cutting breaks cells, enzymes react with amino acid sulfoxide, and a volatile sulfur gas floats up. But here's where it gets interesting. Your eyes aren't just annoyed. They're running a protective response. What exactly happens when that gas hits the wet surface of your eye, and how does that turn into tears? Let's follow the reaction step by step, right as you keep chopping. Your eyes are naturally moist, so when the gas reaches them, it immediately reacts with a thin layer of water on the eye's surface. That reaction forms sulfuric acid right on your eye's moisture. Even in tiny amounts, sulfuric acid is irritating to sensitive eye tissue. The sulfuric acid creates a stinging sensation. That sting isn't random. It's your body detecting that something irritating has landed on the eye. Pain receptors in the eye pick up that irritation signal. They're basically alarm sensors built to notice when the surface is being bothered. Once pain receptors fire, they send messages through your nervous system. The goal is simple: respond quickly before the irritation gets worse. Those signals trigger the tear ducts. Tear ducts are like tiny faucets that can release extra fluid when your eyes need protection. Tears dilute and help rinse away the sulfuric acid, flushing the irritant off the eye. How much you tear up can vary by sensitivity. So why do onions make you cry? Because cutting them triggers chemistry. Sulfur-based compounds react, creating a volatile sulfur gas that reaches your eyes and forms sulfuric acid. That sting flips on pain receptors, which activate tear ducts to flood the surface and wash the irritant away. It's not you being dramatic, it's your eyes doing defense and cleanup. And depending on the onion's sulfur content and your sensitivity, the tears can hit harder or lighter. Popcorn is weird. It starts as a rock-hard kernel, then suddenly turns into a fluffy snack with a loud pop. That's not magic. It's physics happening inside a tiny shell. In this segment, we'll zoom in on what's trapped inside the kernel, what heat does to it, and why the kernel can't hold on forever. So here's the trick. What's really happening inside that little hole right before it explodes? Each popcorn kernel isn't totally dry. It holds a small amount of moisture trapped inside, sealed in like a tiny water packet. When you heat the kernel, that moisture warms up fast. Once it gets hot enough, it turns into steam inside the kernel. Here's the key. The tough hull acts like a lid. It traps the steam, creating a pressurized environment instead of letting vapor drift away. As heating continues, the steam pressure climbs. Inside that pressurized environment, the steam can be pushed past the normal boiling point. At the same time, heat attacks the hard starch inside the kernel. It starts changing from rigid and glassy to something more flexible. That change is called gelatinized starch. The starch absorbs heat and becomes soft and malleable, ready to be shaped by force. Now you've got trapped steam and softened starch together. The steam keeps expanding and the internal pressure keeps rising with nowhere to go. The hull can only handle so much. As pressure builds higher and higher, the kernel reaches a breaking point where the shell can't hold it. So far, we've seen moisture turn into steam, the hull trap it into a pressurized environment, and heat soften the inside into gelatinized starch. But here's where it gets interesting. All that pressure is basically a countdown. The moment the hull fails, everything changes in a split second. What exactly happens when the shell finally gives out, and how does that make the popcorn shape right as it flips inside out? When the internal pressure finally wins, the hull can't resist anymore. It tears open in a sudden rupture that happens almost instantly. That rupture creates an escape route. Steam blasts out rapidly, like opening a shaken bottle, except the pressure was trapped inside the kernel. As steam escapes, it expands fast. That expansion pushes into the softened, gelatinized starch and forces it outward in every direction. This is the puff moment. The starch puffs outward as bubbles form and stretch, turning the compact kernel interior into a larger, airy structure. Right after the rupture, the temperature drops quickly. The sudden expansion and escaping steam remove heat, so the puffed starch starts cooling immediately. Cooling locks the shape in place. As the starch loses heat, it begins to solidify, turning from soft and stretchy into a firm, foamy form. That's why you end up with fluffy popcorn. A burst of steam expands the starch, then it solidifies before it can collapse back down. Now the pop makes sense. Popcorn pops because moisture inside turns to steam. The hull traps it, and pressure builds until the kernel bursts. In that instant, escaping steam expands the softened, gelatinized starch, making it puff outward. Then the temperature drops, the starch starts to solidify, and the new shape gets locked in. One tiny sealed kernel turns into a fluffy piece of popcorn because heat and pressure do the work. Ever notice how mint feels cold, even when it's totally room temperature, like you just swallowed a tiny ice cube? That weird chill isn't just your imagination, and it's not because the mint is actually colder than your mouth. In this segment, we'll track the signal from your tongue to your brain and why it gets labeled as cold. So, what's going on inside you that makes minty equal icy? Let's break down the trick step by step. Mint can trick your senses in a way that's kind of like chili peppers, except the feeling goes in the opposite direction. In peppers, the compound capsaicin creates that burning, hot sensation, even if the food isn't physically hot at all. Capsaicin works by activating TRPV1 receptors on your tongue, basically flipping the same switch your body uses to detect heat. Normally, TRPV1 receptors respond when you drink something truly hot like tea because they're built to detect physical heat directly. But capsaicin can mimic heat through chemical activation, so the receptor fires even without a real temperature increase at all. This whole chemical feels like temperature effect is part of chemesthesis, where certain molecules trigger sensations like hot, cold, or tingling. Your brain doesn't see the chemical directly, it reads the nerve signal and labels it as heat, because that's what TRPV1 usually means. So the burn isn't real heat on a thermometer, it's a sensory trick, a perception created by receptors getting chemically pushed. So far, we've seen how a chemical like capsaicin can hijack heat-sensing receptors and make your brain shout hot without real heat. But here's where it gets interesting. Mint pulls the same kind of trick in reverse. If peppers can fake warmth, how does mint make you feel cold, like icy air, when nothing actually cooled down? Now watch this. Your mouth has cold sensors too, and they can be fooled the same way. Mint plants like peppermint produce menthol, and menthol is a terpene that your mouth recognizes instantly as that classic minty punch. That signature flavor comes with a sensation, because menthol doesn't just taste minty, it also interacts with your sensory wiring directly. Menthol activates TRPM8 receptors, which are basically your mouth's cold receptors, the ones that normally respond when something is truly chilly. When TRPM8 detects cold temperatures, it sends signals up nerves, and your brain interprets those signals as cold or cooling. Menthol can mimic cold through chemical activation, so TRPM8 fires even though the mint isn't actually lowering the temperature in your mouth. Once those signals reach your brain, it treats them like real cold input, so you feel an icy chill from a simple mint. Important caveat: the cold sensation is a perception, not a physical change in temperature. Your mouth isn't actually getting colder, just receiving cold signals. So, why does mint feel cold? Because menthol activates TRPM8, the same cold detecting receptors your body uses for real chill. Your brain reads that signal and decides this is icy, even though the mint didn't actually drop the temperature. It's a chemical illusion, cooling without real cooling. Next time you taste mint, you'll know it's your sensors getting fooled, not your mouth freezing, and that's the whole trick.